Very good morning, dear students and my colleagues. I'm highly excited to introduce you to today's guest, who is the founder of world's first neuro marketing agency, that is salesbrain.com, Mr. Patrick Renvoise. Patrick is a French researcher and neuromarketing expert who is currently in California. Patrick has spent his life selling complicated and expensive products, which includes multi-million-dollar supercomputer. Patrick, a very good evening, and I welcome you on behalf of Symbiosis Centre for Management Studies, Pune, India. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, and good morning to you.
Thank you. So it's a pleasure and honor to host you on this online platform for this session. My first question would be, so before we begin, I would like to mention that we have already sent our students your excellent video on neuromarketing, which talks about, is there a buy button inside the brain? So on that platform, we would like to begin. Should we begin, sir?
Absolutely. Whatever you want to take this interview, I'm happy to try to answer your questions.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. So in some countries, including India, there is an attitude which is growing. It is about country-made products, or say vocal for local, right? So how do you think it will turn out to be from neuromarketing perspective? Will that turn out to be just a short-lived fad, or do you see that it is going to be something long-term?
So first of all, I don't have a crystal ball. So this is a very difficult question to ask. Now, we are living very special times right now because we have this epidemic that came up very quickly and took a lot of people by surprise. And when we get into this kind of really unusual situation, people revert back to their roots, which is all about survival. So I heard some people that were trying to explain why, the epidemic first arrived in the US, why people were buying toilet paper. And there is a number of psychologists that are hypothesizing that it's because when you have an epidemic like this and you can't really do anything about it. I mean, if you're not an epidemiologist and you're not working on trying to find a vaccine or trying to solve the problem, there is not much you can do to protect yourself. So people feel like they are incapable of taking any actions that could help. So they revert to doing an action which is really not going to help at all, because toilet paper is not going to protect you from the virus, but at least it gives people the illusion of control. Right? So that's what I have heard some psychologists hypothesize on. Now, my expertise is in a different area. My expertise is in building sales and marketing strategies that are going to work because they are based on how the human brain responds. So I can explain a number of things which are happening now under the COVID with my model, if you want. But again, my expertise is really in the field of applying this model of how people use their brain to make buying decisions. So, I don't want to present myself as an expert in something which I am not really trained for. But I'm going to give you in 2 words the extent of my theory, if you want. And sure. I'd like to use my favorite prop. So I don't know if everybody sees my video right now, but I carry a human brain with me. It's a scale 1 medically accurate model of the brain. And my theory is that we human beings, we do not act rationally. In fact, we have 2 brains. One section of the brain is the outside, the wrinkly, pinky section of the brain. We call that the rational brain. And a number of experts in the world, including a guy by the name of Daniel Kahneman, who won the Nobel Prize in Economy in 2002. Kahneman demonstrated that this part of the brain, which he calls System 2, is not really the decision maker, it's a decision influencer. But that the real decision maker can be found further down inside the brain. And that brain is called the Primal Brain. It's made of 3 sections. It's made of the top of the stem, the section that unite both hemispheres. This is referred to as the reptilian complex. And then another section which is called the middle brain. Now all together, this is referred to as the primal brain. And the primal brain is the brain that we share with all vertebrates. Because if you look at any animal that has vertebrae, their brain is the termination of their nervous system. You know, the vertebrae are around the spine here. And the spine is the bus that carries information to and from the brain. So this brain, which is again called the primal brain, it's an ancient brain. It's about 100 times older than our neocortex. People like Daniel Kahneman have demonstrated beyond reasonable doubt that our primal brain is the decision maker. It is the one that drives the decision-making process. It calls on the neocortex to make the decision, but this is the boss. This is a decision influencer. So again, I've dedicated the last 20 years of my life based on this theory to come up with a model and rules that people need to apply if, when they are in a sales situation, they want to be more persuasive. They want to make sure that people will say yes to their proposal. So again, we can explain a number of decisions that we're seeing around the world right now, which are due to the COVID on this model, right? But this is not my expertise. In fact, I don't know if you have seen, but I have a TED Talk. And in my TED Talk, I present some of the working principles of the primal brain. And the end of my TED Talk is to invite people that are expert in other areas besides sales and marketing. People, for example, that are expert in education, in policy, in law, in parenting. I mean, all these different people have a need to have a model that explains why we act the way we act. So I would love to work with some of those specialists to really take my model, which I have applied to sales and marketing, and apply it to parenting. I mean, parenting is raising kids. It's a very complicated issue. Why? Because your kids, especially when you're dealing with teenagers, teenagers is a good example that teenagers react by using their primal brain at 98%. Teenagers are not rational. So how do you teach them things? How do you make sure they follow the rules? How do you do all these things? Or even dating. Our publisher has told us that we should write a book on dating based on the behavior which is imparted to us with our primal brain. Because if you think about it, I mean, I don't know what it is in India, but in the United States, the statistics are that 1 couple out of 2 divorce. So there is something wrong here, right? I mean, we can do better than 50%. So if people knew better who they are from their primal brain perspective, and if the person they are trying to marry would also know themselves better from a private, then we would have more chances to get less divorces. So I'm sorry, it was a long introduction.
No, that was really good. We got a lot of insight. So my question would be, since I have seen in a few of your videos, you talk extensively about the reptilian brain as well. And right now also you talked about it. How do you see the lot of advertisers, are they currently using neuromarketing principles, or they are still sticking to the age-old psychological principles only?
Okay, so first of all, let's define exactly what neuromarketing is, because neuromarketing is the use of neurophysiological measurements which are created by the response of a human being to a certain stimulus. But let me backtrack a little bit before I start talking about neuromarketing to talk about what marketing is. So marketing started about 80 or 70, 80 years ago. And the promise of marketing is this. It's that we're going to ask people what do they want, and then based on their answers, we will create a product, and then later we will create a strategy to sell that product. But the promise of marketing is valid if people know what they want. But in reality, now that we've made so much progress, we know for sure now that when you ask people, what do you want? They're going to give you an answer to please you. They are going to lie, although they're not going to lie deliberately, but it's the reality is people don't really know what they want. So the fallacy of marketing is that by forcing people to self-report what they want, you have to filter their answer, and it's going to have to go through language. In other words, they're going to have to use different sections of their brain to be able to express what they really want. And forcing their answer to go through some parts of the brain, including the auditory cortex and all the higher levels of the brain that we use for language, this is going to bias their answers. So we know now, and we've known this for about 20 to 30 years, that focus groups don't really work well because people don't know what they want. So the promise of neural marketing, which started only about 20 years ago, is that we're not going to trust what people tell us when we ask them, what do you want? Instead, we can measure directly on their body various physiological changes that are going to give us a much more accurate version of what they want. And these, we call them modalities. So that includes, for example, putting electrodes on their brain and measuring the electroencephalogram. So we measure the brain waves that are generated by their brain activities. We measure how their pupils dilate. Because, for example, when people get excited about something, their pupils, as a reflex, dilates. Now, that dilation can be very fast. Sometimes it lasts less than 1/10 of a second. But if you're capable of measuring exactly when that happened, that means that when you ask them the question, what do you want? Or when they are telling you what they want, they got really excited about something. So it's like using a highlighter on what they say. The other modalities that we use is we extract the emotion that they display based on how they contract the 43 muscles on their faces. Then we can also track their eyes. It's called eye tracking, right? So we can track in real time where their eyes are looking inside an image. We measure how electricity flows between our two fingers. Why? Because these sensors called the galvanic skin resistance measurement. Because when you lie, for example, even if you don't lie deliberately, right? You don't really provide a deep answer. It will increase the resistance of your, it will decrease the resistance of your skin. So all these physiological measurements at the end of the day, it's a way for us to peer inside the brain of people and get a real look at what they want. So this has been started about 20 years ago. And of course, just like any new science, it's making progress every day. There are more and more companies that offer various kinds of services around neural marketing, but that is the definition of neural marketing. Now, on top of that, on top of this notion of neural marketing, what we have done with SalesBrain is we have come up with a model of predictability of how the primal brain reacts to various kinds of stimulus. So even if we don't, and we do this kind of research, right? We do this kind of physiological measurement. But even without going there, we can explain the behavior of people with this dual brain model. In other words, when you really understand the working principles of the neocortex versus the primal brain, then you can predict if a marketing campaign, if an email, if a voicemail, if a web page is going to have a certain impact on the brain of other people. So this model is semi-empirical. It is based on science. For example, in our last book, we have over 300 scientific papers, references that we've been using to explain our model. And again, I'm not sure if the image that you're seeing through my camera is very, very good, but our model fits on one page. And this is the model, right? And the model starts with explanations on how the primal brain works. And then based on the only 6 stimuli that can reach this primal brain, we have deducted 4 key steps to maximize your probability to sell, which, as you can imagine, are super important when you do sales and marketing. So again, my expertise lies in this model and the 4 steps in sales, which are pain, claim, gain, and primal brain. Okay, so again, neural marketing is a very important new science. It's in infancy because it's only about 20 years old. But besides all this, companies like ours, we have created models that are way more scientific than whatever people had before to predict the impact of a marketing and sales campaign.
Yes, thank you, Patrick. So I was consistently focusing on one thing when you mentioned that consumers may not know what they want. Is it correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So I believe that the science of neuromarketing can be highly useful while promoting innovative products. What would you have to say about it?
Sure. I mean, in fact, in the United States, the statistics are the following. Of every 10 company that goes public, so of course, before going public, there are millions of companies that fail, right? So, the filter to go public is already very, very fine. So only a few companies go public. But of all the companies that go public in the United States, 9 out of 10 go bankrupt after a few years. So can you imagine? Yeah. I mean, we being the world, right? We invest billions of dollars every year in trying to find something that people want. But the reality, most of it fail. So if neuro marketing could help us decide early in the process what has a chance to survive, then if we can do better than 90% failure, that would be very good.
Certainly, sir.
I'll give you another famous example that they use in every marketing university in the United States. A few years ago when the web first started, there was a small startup in the US called Webvan. And the promise of Webvan was very simple. As soon as the web became available and more people were using a browser and had internet access, people said, oh, we understand the consumer. The consumer does not like to go to the grocery store. So the web would be the perfect platform to do that, because provided you can have access to enough providers of groceries and you would have big enough warehouses where you could store it, then everybody could go on the web, place the order for orange juice, tomatoes, and chicken, whatever. And then this company called Webvan would organize all the logistics to deliver the whole thing. So that was about, I don't remember exactly, but that's about 20 years ago, right? So Webvan invested between $1 and $2 billion in building those warehouses and etc. And to this date, it's one of the biggest flops. In other words, at least at the time, 20 years ago, people still wanted to go to the store to decide what they want to buy for dinner. And if you ask people, what do you want early on, they will tell you, oh yeah, it's a good idea. I don't want to go to the grocery store. Give me a solution to that. Webvan had done it. They had made these marketing surveys, and they found that when asked, would you like not to have to go shopping? Would you be willing to do your home shopping online? And there is a company called Webvan that will deliver the groceries to your place. 90% of the people said yes. At the end of the day, when they were ready to start their business, Webvan lasted 6 months or 1 year. And then they went bankrupt because almost nobody went there.
So what would you blame there? Marketing research that went wrong, or what else?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understand your question.
Yeah, so in this scenario where Webvan, I don't know I got that name correctly or not. So what would you point out? What went wrong exactly? The market research or what?
Yeah, because again, when you ask people, what do you want? They don't know. So right. The problem with marketing, if I use my model, the problem of marketing is that you're only going to get a neocortex answer. People are going to tell you from a rational perspective what they think they want. But the primal brain, which is way more the brain of emotion, and I know it would make some neuroscientists cringe here, but I like to make the association between primal brain and unconscious brain. Right? So it's the brain that you're not conscious about. It's the brain that is completely automatic. It's a brain that deals with low-level functioning, controls your heart rate, your breathing, your body temperature, your digestion. All of that is controlled by your primal brain. So all these low-level functions, I mean, for most people, you don't have to think about your digestion, right? You cannot control. And even your breathing, you can control your breathing only to a certain degree. But if I tell you stop breathing after 30 seconds, you will have to breathe. So that brain is really the brain of the unconscious. So if when Webvan started to launch their company, they had been able to design a questionnaire which would have gone beyond the rational answer that everybody's going to give you, then maybe they would have been able to detect that for a lot of consumers, walking the aisles of a grocery store is the place where they make the decision, am I going to get noodles or am I going to get this? No, they need to be stimulated by the real image of the product in front of them. They didn't know they wanted it, but then they realized they want it, they need it, and they take it. So, I mean, and I know that's the way I work. I mean, if you ask me now, what do you want? I'll say, oh, that's okay, anything. But if I go to the store and I see something, I go, oh, great, I want this now. So for a lot of people, having this experience is more important than the facility of doing the home shopping online. So it's a trade-off, right? For some people, they will be willing to endure the pain of having to take their car, parking their car in front of the grocery store, walking through the grocery store, waiting to pay online, loading their car, unloading, driving back home, unloading the groceries at home, etc. For some people, I mean, apparently up until recently, for a lot of people, the facility that was generated by a company like Webvan was not counterbalanced by the fact that people like to walk the house to decide what they want to buy.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Patrick, for that expression. Yes.
That's the amazing part, is that the marketing of Webvan was probably driven by a number of really smart marketing people. People that have an MBA from Harvard or Stanford or, the best IIT school in the world. It doesn't matter, right? They were full of good intention. They used rational information to do it. But fundamentally, that was wrong because that was not predicting what people really want when they go shopping for groceries.
Yes, got that, Patrick. Thank you so much, Patrick. I would like to take a couple of questions from the students as well. So I request you, dear students, if you have any questions, please put in the chat box. Till that time, I have one more question till the time you chat. So, okay, so students are prepared already. Here's the first question. Kshitij is asking, did Cambridge Analytica use neuro marketing or just data interpretation and analysis?
No, I mean, to my knowledge, they did not use neuro marketing. From an ethical perspective, I don't think they would have any problem to use it. I think they use much more like big data. Right? That's the idea. So they use sophisticated algorithms to extract psychological profiles and figure out what kind of messages they should serve to some people to influence them. So to my knowledge, they didn't use neuro marketing. But it doesn't mean that what they did was very legal or ethical.
Got that. So there are a couple of more questions. This is a little bit more technical. By how far is computational neuroscience accurate, like neurovision? So would you like to say something about it?
If you can explain the question maybe a little bit better, I might be able to give you an answer. But right now, I do not understand the question.
Got that. So we'll just move to the next question. Marlin is asking, won't this increase the cost in the field of research and development way more if we are investing on neuroscience?
Yeah, I agree that it does increase the cost, but it's a trade-off you have to make. Do you want to have a low cost and get 90% of the ideas that you generate that will fail? Or do you want to increase the cost a little bit and get only 60% of failure?
Got that. So the next question is, how does big data can be used side by side with neuromarketing?
So that's a very, very complicated question. The promise of big data is that because now with Google, you can track all the clicks of pretty much everybody around the world. You can build very sophisticated psychological profiles of who your users are. So the promise of big data is that I'll give you an example. So I really love motorcycles. I have several motorcycles and I like to ride motorcycles. And now, of course, every time I check my emails or whatever, I get bombarded by spam messages of people that have figured out that I love motorcycles. Now, they know it because somehow, somewhere, there is an algorithm that has been able to leak one click that I made one day on Amazon because I bought a part for my motorcycle to my behavior. So they are only serving to me the messages which, in theory, are supposed to be of interest to me. Now, again, when you do that with the highest level of ethics, it's very good. But when you give that to a dictator, then you can get to some really nasty results. And American politics is probably a good example of what's happening right now, right, in that field. So when you add a layer of truthfulness on top of that, by using the result of neuromarketing research, then you can really reach that area, that gray area, which people are going to call manipulation. So that is one of the danger.
Yes.
Right? So yes, you can combine big data with neuromarketing. I think the main issue there is ethics.
Thank you, Patrick. Because of the time constraint, we cannot take more questions. There is just one question that I would like to take, that is from Abhiraj. He's asking, what would be a step towards neuromarketing from a student perspective? How would one go about stepping into the field, for example, as a marketing management student?
Sure.
Finding an internship or something like that.
Yeah. There are several universities now that are starting to deliver neuromarketing degrees. I think we're starting to see neuromarketing PhDs. My partner has a PhD in, I can't remember exactly his PhD, but he teaches neuromarketing at the PhD level. Right? So there's going to be more and more degrees that are there. So I would encourage anybody who is interested in the field to really start to get their feet wet and look at what it is. Now, keep in mind that the science is very young. It's only 20 years old. So 20 years old for a science is almost nothing. So you still need to be careful and separate the reality from the fiction. So a lot of people do not understand what neuromarketing is. Some people say it's manipulation. Some people give it powers that it doesn't have. There are a lot of limitations. There are a lot of constraints. One of them is it typically takes time to do very good neuromarketing research. And the sample size becomes very important if you want to have statistical relevancy. So if you combine an EEG measurement and you need hundreds of thousands of people to do it, as you can imagine, the cost is going to be very, very high. So I'm telling you all this just so that people don't get enamored. It's a new science. There are still side effects. There's a lot to be discovered, but it's fascinating because we are getting closer and closer from having a 100% scientifically accurate model of how people use this to make decisions. So the endeavor is exciting.
Super. Thanks a lot, Patrick. That was the last question from the audience. I would like to request placement department to go ahead with the vote of thanks.
Thank you, sir. On behalf of our director, Dr. Adya Sharma, our beloved faculty and staff, and our dear students, I would like to take this opportunity to thank Mr. Patrick Renvoise for this wonderful session. It was an honor to have you interact with us, sir. Thank you for sparing some of your valuable time to connect with our students. I would like to extend my gratitude to all those who helped facilitate this session, especially Dr. Sushil, Dr. Ashutosh, and Ms. Deepa for their constant guidance, and the IT department for their continuous support. Lastly, I would like to thank each and every student for their active interest in this initiative and for cooperating with us. Thank you, and stay safe, everyone.
Thank you very much, and good day to you.
Good day, Patrick. Thanks a lot. Thank you.